His Last Beau, 1917, Episode 6. The Devil's Foot. Welcome back, fellow detectives. After Holmes learned a hard lesson about underestimating cases, you've seen how even genius can be humbled. But today's case takes us to Cornwall's wild coast, where Holmes faces not just a baffling mystery, but a profound moral dilemma about justice and revenge. Have you ever encountered evil so pure it seemed supernatural, where the only adequate response to horror is more horror? Prepare for one of the darkest cases, where madness and death strike without warning, where exotic poison brings nightmare visions, and where Holmes must decide if some acts of revenge are actually justice. Picture March 1897 in a cottage on Cornwall's windswept cliffs. Holmes is here on doctor's orders, overworking again, showing nervous exhaustion. Watson insisted on this holiday to restore his health. They've rented a modest cottage near Poldhu Bay, spending days walking the rugged coastline. "This is exactly what you needed, Holmes," Watson says, returning from a morning walk. "No cases, no criminals, just sea air and rest." Holmes stretches, looking relaxed. "I confess you were right. My mind was overstrained. The enforced idleness is actually pleasant." But that peaceful morning shatters when their landlady, Mrs. Porter, arrives in distress with the vicar, Mr. Roundhay. "Mr. Holmes, something terrible at Tregennis, the Tregennis house. The family has been struck by madness in the night. It's horrible, unnatural. Think about this moment. Holmes came to Cornwall specifically to avoid cases, but can he turn away from people in desperate need? And can his restless intellect ignore a mystery presenting itself so dramatically?" They rush to Tregennis. The scene is disturbing. In the parlor sit three people, two brothers and a sister, arranged around a card table as if playing whist the previous evening, but their faces tell a story of unimaginable terror. The sister, Brenda Tregennis, is dead, her face frozen in pure horror, eyes wide, mouth open in silent scream. Her two brothers, George and Owen, are alive but completely insane, sitting motionless, occasionally moaning, eyes vacant and terrified. They don't respond to voices, don't recognize faces, trapped in some internal nightmare. "Good God," Watson breathes, checking for vital signs. "What could cause this simultaneous madness and death?" The local doctor shakes his head. "I've never seen anything like it. It's as if they were literally frightened to death or to madness." Holmes examines the room with intense concentration. The window was closed and latched from inside. The door was locked. Their brother Mortimer found them this morning and had to break in. No signs of violence, no furniture disturbance except scattered cards as if they jumped up suddenly. And look at this. He points to the fireplace. The fire had burned very low when found, almost out. Yet the room was quite warm. Why would they let the fire burn low if cold? And notice the ash. It's been disturbed, swept about by a draft, but the window and door were both secured. Where did the draft come from? Can you see the impossibility? A sealed room, three people struck simultaneously by terror so profound it killed one and drove two permanently insane. No weapon, no poison detected. It's the kind of mystery that in superstitious eras would be blamed on demons. Mortimer Tregennis, the fourth sibling who wasn't present, is devastated. "I left them after dinner around 8 o'clock. They were perfectly normal, laughing, planning their card game. I went to my cottage half a mile away. This morning when I came to visit, I found that..." "Had there been any quarrels?" Holmes asks. "Any tensions, disputes?" Mortimer shakes his head. "We've always been close. We had no enemies, no conflicts. This is utterly inexplicable, Mr. Holmes. It's as if the devil himself visited last night. Asked. Holmes examines the room again, focusing on the fireplace. He collects ash samples, studies soot patterns, tests draft patterns with a candle. Watson, look at this. The ash contains unusual residue, organic material burned, but not wood or coal. Something else was thrown onto the fire last night, something that, when burned, produced smoke with properties. Think about what Holmes is suggesting. A poison delivered through inhalation. Smoke containing substance that caused hallucinations so terrifying they killed one person and destroyed two minds. But what substance could have such devastating effects? The investigation takes a curious turn when they learn about Leon Sterndale, a famous explorer and big game hunter who lives part-time in Cornwall. He's been studying native poisons in Africa, Mortimer explains. He left for London yesterday morning, planning to depart for Africa. But I heard he's returned suddenly. Holmes's eyes sharpen. An expert in exotic poisons, present in the area, suddenly departing and returning. We must speak with Mr. Sterndale immediately. They find him at his cottage, a large, imposing man with weathered face and confident bearing. His reaction to the tragedy seems genuine, deep grief mixed with barely controlled rage. I heard what happened, Sterndale says, voice rough with emotion. I was in Plymouth waiting for my ship when a telegram reached me. I returned immediately. Brenda, Miss Tregennis, we were, he struggles. You were in love with her? Holmes completes. Sterndale nods. For years, but she was married unhappily and I was always traveling. But the feeling was real. And now she's dead in the most horrible circumstances. Mr. Sterndale, Holmes says carefully, you're an expert in exotic poisons. Can you think of any substance that could produce these effects? Sterndale considers. The symptoms sound like something I encountered in West Africa, a root called Radix pedis diaboli, the devil's foot root. The natives burn it to produce hallucinogenic smoke. Those who inhale experience terrifying visions that feel absolutely real. But I've never heard of it causing death, Sterndale adds. Effects should wear off after hours. For it to kill one person and permanently destroy two minds, the dose would have to be enormous. Victims confined to breathe smoke for extended period. Holmes asks the crucial question, do you possess any of this devil's foot root? Sterndale hesitates. You do possess it. You brought samples from Africa. Mr. Sterndale, where is this root now? Sterndale's face hardens. It's in my laboratory under lock and key. If you're suggesting I had anything to do with this, you're mad. I loved Brenda. I would have died to protect her. Holmes requests to examine Sterndale's laboratory. Inside, they find an impressive collection of specimens and notes. Holmes immediately locates the devil's foot root, dried pieces stored in a sealed jar. How much is here? Sterndale counts. All of it. I brought back 6 pieces from Africa. 6 remain. None is missing. But Holmes examines the jar more carefully. This seal has been broken and resealed. Look at the wax. Different color, around the edge, slightly softer. Someone opened this jar, removed contents, then tried to disguise the theft. Sterndale's face shows genuine surprise. That's impossible. No one has access except me. Clearly someone did, Holmes counters. Has anyone shown particular interest in your poison collection? Sterndale thinks. Dr. Leon Tregennis, Mortimer's brother. He's an amateur scientist, fascinated by toxins. He visited several times, asked detailed questions. But Mortimer would never harm his own family. Holmes and Watson exchange meaningful glances. Mortimer Tregennis, the 4th sibling, the only one not present when tragedy struck, the one who discovered the bodies the next morning, the one who'd had access to Sterndale's laboratory. They returned to question Mortimer more carefully. Holmes notices details missed before. Mortimer's grief seems performative, lacking depth of real anguish. His hands are steady, and when Holmes mentions inheritance, Mortimer's eyes flicker with satisfaction. "Mr. Tregennis," Holmes says, "you visited Mr. Sterndale's laboratory, showed great interest in his poisons." Mortimer pales. Yes, I've always been interested in natural science, but what does that—" Holmes interrupts. "Everything, because I believe you stole a piece of devil's foot root, burned it in your sibling's parlor, and murdered your sister while driving your brothers insane." Can you imagine Mortimer's shock? He stammers, "That's absurd. Why would I harm my own family?" But Holmes is relentless because of the estate. The four of you inherited jointly. Perhaps there were disputes about management. Perhaps your siblings refused to sell when you wanted to. You saw a chance to eliminate them in a way that would appear supernatural. You knew about the devil's foot root from your visits to Sterndale's laboratory. You stole a piece, then visited your siblings that evening. You stayed for dinner, waited until they settled to their card game, then approached the fireplace, perhaps to throw on more coal. Instead, you threw the devil's foot root onto flames and quickly left, locking the door so they couldn't escape the smoke. Mortimer's face goes ashen. You can't prove this. It's speculation. But Holmes produces evidence. A small fragment of root he'd discovered hidden in Mortimer's coat pocket. Under sustained questioning, Mortimer's resolve crumbles. He confesses, "They wouldn't let me sell the estate. I had debts, needed money desperately, but they refused every offer. They were condemning me to poverty to preserve meaningless tradition." Watson is disgusted. "You murdered your own sister and destroyed your brother's minds for an inheritance?" Mortimer tries to justify, "I didn't know it would be so horrible. I thought they'd be frightened, perhaps unconscious. I never intended for Brenda to die." Think about this excuse. The murderer claims he didn't mean for the worst to happen, but he deliberately used poison he knew would cause terror, deliberately trapped siblings in a room filling with toxic smoke. Does intent matter when the action was fundamentally evil? Mortimer is arrested, protesting weakly, but the case takes a final, unexpected turn that night. Holmes and Watson are awakened by pounding. Leon Sterndale, his face terrible with cold purpose. "Mr. Holmes, I need you to understand what I'm about to do and why I believe it's justice." He leads them to an outbuilding where Mortimer sits bound, apparently kidnapped from police custody. "I bribed the constable. Mortimer murdered the woman I loved using my poison. The law will hang him eventually, but not before months of trials. I can't wait. I won't wait." Holmes and Watson realize with horror what Sterndale intends. "You're going to use the devil's foot root on him? Give him the same death he gave Brenda?" Sterndale nods grimly. "An eye for an eye. It's the only proportionate justice." "This is murder," Watson protests. But Sterndale's response is chilling in its logic. "Mortimer killed out of greed. I'm executing a sentence for an unforgivable crime. The difference matters." Holmes faces a terrible decision: stop Sterndale and preserve rule of law, or allow him to exact vengeance that has certain terrible justice. Watson watches his friend struggle with this moral dilemma. "Mr. Sterndale," Holmes finally says, "if you do this, you become a murderer yourself. The law exists precisely to prevent this kind of personal revenge. Once we allow individuals to decide who deserves death, we descend into chaos." Sterndale pulls out a piece of devil's foot root and a brazier. "Mr. Holmes, I'm going to light this. You can try to stop me, but you won't, because somewhere in your mind you understand that Mortimer deserves this fate. Think about this moral trap. Sterndale is right that punishment fits crime perfectly, but he's also advocating for private vengeance over public justice. Where do your sympathies lie? Holmes stands paralyzed by indecision, and in that moment Sterndale lights the brazier and throws the root onto flames. Smoke begins to rise, and Mortimer screams, but before smoke can spread, Holmes makes his decision. He rushes forward and throws open all windows, dispersing smoke before it can take effect. No, Holmes says firmly, I cannot allow this. The law must prevail. Mortimer will hang for his crime through proper legal process. Sterndale looks at Holmes with something between disappointment and respect. You're a better man than I am, or perhaps a weaker one. But then Sterndale does something unexpected. He takes a deep breath of the rapidly dispersing smoke himself, deliberately inhaling remaining traces. If Mortimer won't experience what Brenda did, then I will. I'll know her last moments, understand her final terror. Holmes and Watson try to stop him, but Sterndale has already breathed deeply. Within moments, he's on the floor, eyes wide with terror, seeing visions only he can perceive. Watson administers what aid he can, but there's no antidote. They can only wait and watch as Sterndale experiences the nightmare his beloved suffered. Can you imagine deliberately choosing to experience this torture? Sterndale's love for Brenda was so profound, he's willing to endure the same death she did. It's simultaneously the most romantic and most horrifying act either detective has witnessed. Hours pass. Sterndale writhes, screaming at visions, fighting invisible horrors. As dawn breaks, the effects begin to fade. Sterndale gradually returns to rationality, exhausted and traumatized, but alive. I understand now, he whispers, what she experienced, the absolute terror, and Mortimer must pay. Holmes faces Sterndale with sadness. You've proven your love beyond doubt, but revenge won't bring her back. Don't compound Mortimer's evil with evil of your own. Trust the law to punish him appropriately. So tell me, detective, where do you stand on this moral question? Is Sterndale's desire for proportionate revenge making Mortimer experience exactly what he inflicted, justice or murder? Does the perfect matching of punishment to crime make it more moral or less? The case concludes with Mortimer standing trial, convicted and sentenced to death. The evidence is overwhelming, his confession documented, but the execution is clinical, quick. Nothing